Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer, AI 171. The investigation continues. We're going to look at it from a different angle today. What was the real reason? Was it the Boeing technical flaws? And there are lots of them. In fact, this particular plane itself was talked about even as it was trying to make its way out of the door in Boeing. A lot of stuff to discuss, and let's welcome our expert Kalavai Venkat. Kalavai, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel. How are you?
Namaskar, Sree. I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Venkat. So let's jump straight in. Three possibilities, right? One is there was a Boeing technical issue that flared up, or there could have been a pilot error, not knowing how to respond to a particular evolving emergency, or there was sabotage. So these are the three options that we've been talking about. Initial things indicated that perhaps there could be a sabotage, but it's still not ruled out. At the same time, there are other things that have come up which perhaps were lingering just below the surface. Now they have come up. So Venkat, you and I, we are technical stuff. We can understand what technology is, what's going on. Bunch of sloppy stuff that happened when these planes were being manufactured in the Boeing South Carolina plant. Talk to us through this. And there's also the MCAS software itself. That is another big unknown. Did that act up? I mean, so there are lots of things to talk. I'll yield the floor to you now.
Thank you, Sree. I think what is the current death toll? I think they have already recovered something like 265 bodies from the crash site, and the actual death toll could be even higher than that. I think only one person from the entire, uh, uh, plane survived, and he was a British Indian national, and then he survived. All the others died. So my heartfelt condolences on the death of all of those souls, all of the 265 people, and then others who may have been injured, everyone. And then I express my sincere, condolences and also my sympathies for the family members. I think it's a really big tragedy. Uh, let's start with discussion, right? Let's start with all the three options you're mentioning. Let's start with sabotage. Is sabotage a possibility? I think we should always look into every angle, and sabotage could always be one because just a couple of days ago, an ex-CIA operative had warned about some terrorist plots being hatched against India, and that would be of huge proportion. However, I think at this stage, sabotage seems to be a less likely scenario. And I'll tell you the reason why when we go into the technical discussion a little bit in a minute or two. But I think it's unlikely to be the case. And when I explain the technical discussion, I will also explain why it may not be sabotage. But I'm not ruling it out, right? Until all the investigations are complete, we cannot rule out any of the options. Second one is the pilot error, okay, the possibility of pilot error. So in this case, the plane, after it took off, it crashed in about 30 seconds or so. Okay, that's all. It remained airborne, right? And after that, it crashed. It only ascended to a height of around 625 feet or 630 feet, which is really low. And then its vertical velocity at the time, after probably it has just stalled or just before stalling, was around 470 feet per minute. Okay, that's the speed at which we are jogging normally, around 8 kilometers an hour. Okay, and at that stage, it stalled, it crashed. So when you put all these things together, every pointer is pointing towards uh, technical failure on the part of the aircraft and less on the part of the pilot. But again, why I don't think it's a pilot error? Because the pilots made a call, okay, and then that was made within those 30 seconds, and pilots make a mayday call only when both engines have failed, okay, and it's a very catastrophic situation. I will also mention another aspect that one other option that you did not mention. Could it have been bird hits, okay, or could it have been fuel contamination? So starting with the bird hits, if there have been in the past some of the planes around the world which have been brought down because birds hit the engines. But for for two engines in a modern jetliner to fail simultaneously with bird hits, that's a very low probability. And then second, but again, I'm not completely ruling it out. We should always wait for the full investigation to be over. But then simultaneously being hit by birds and the plane stalling, okay, and then the plane not able to generate enough of lift. All of these things cannot be attributed to bird hits, prima facie speaking. Fuel contamination, it's always a rare possibility. And what typically happens with fuel contamination is that jet A1 fuel, which is basically kerosene or a more refined form of kerosene, which is used in aircraft, and that gets sometimes contaminated with water particles. Okay? And when it happens, when the plane ascends to a higher altitude, mostly the cruising altitude of 30,000 feet, 35,000 feet, etc., at the time that water starts separating and it starts forming icicles. Then it goes into the fuel line and then into the engines, and then that's where the engines can stop. So, but this cannot happen at the ground level, at the height of 630 feet above ground level, because the temperature in Ahmedabad was like 40 or 41 degrees Celsius in the afternoon around 1:30 when the flight took off. So once again, I doubt it's a case of fuel contamination. Absolutely, every investigation should happen, but those are not the things that oil companies take lightly. There's a lot of QC checks that go on, but more importantly, for the reason I mentioned, the freezing of water doesn't happen at ground level. So this leaves us with a major aspect of the discussion. Was there a technical failure? Was there a design failure on the aircraft? You already mentioned MCAS. We'll talk about that in a minute. And I do not know if it's an MCAS failure in this case, but we are going to talk about that. But before we go into that, let's also spend a minute or two on the engines themselves. Okay, so typically, the Dreamliner, which crashed in this case, uses one of the two engines. I think most of the engines are CFM LEAP, okay, 1B most of the cases, and that's jointly manufactured under the aegis of GE. And then the other one is the Rolls-Royce Trent 1000. Most of the planes, I think, ordered by Air India in recent years use the GE or the CFM engine. But in this particular aircraft, I do not know which engine was used. And but the reason I mentioned that is some of these engines are known to use a lot of composites. And some of these composites are known to degrade and then to cause some kind of engine issue, temporary stalling issue, etc., at very high altitudes. But once again, I'm not sure whether that could have happened with both engines simultaneously just right after takeoff. Okay, so which seems very unlikely to me. Okay, so this brings us back to the very fundamental question of, was there a technical failure? Was there a design failure on the part of Boeing? And we'll discuss that in a minute, but you mentioned the MCAS, so let me tie the two stories together. Now, if you look at it, this particular air crash, look at the coverage in the Western media. They do touch upon all the angles, but the ones they are very eager to highlight is a video posted by a passenger who had traveled from New Delhi to Ahmedabad, got off there, and the flight was supposed to fly out from Ahmedabad to London from there on. So he had posted a video saying that the air conditioner was not working in the plane, and then the entertainment systems were not working, and it was a terrible service. Okay. I can easily relate to that, and all of these
looks
things.
Like that was announced as a fake. Make sure that I'm not 100% sure.
No, I think that was real. I saw the video. I don't think it's a fake video, because a lot of times people get annoyed when AC is not working, and when you're waiting for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, etc. But the key to remember is that the power systems in an aircraft that power the air conditioner, the entertainment systems within the aircraft, and then the air conditioners, then the lights, everything is completely different from the power systems that power the engine. The auxiliary power units that kick in when there is an engine failure, or what they call RAT or RAT, which is Ram Air Turbine, which can be deployed as an emergency measure. And in this case, it was deployed. Okay, so what happens with RAT is when both engines fail under a mayday circumstance. That's when pilots typically issue a mayday warning because with one engine they can still fly and get down safely. But when they make a mayday call, which these pilots did, it means both engines have most likely failed, and they recognized it right away, and they were not getting lift. And then they deployed 𝗤𝗡𝗙. So what does it do? When both of them fail, it's a small turbine that drops down and then it starts powering the aircraft. And in this case, it has been now confirmed that as soon as the mayday call was made, the pilots had deployed the ram air turbine, and still the plane could not be saved and the plane crashed. Okay? So this once again to me points out to a major catastrophic failure. But before we go into those discussions, the reason I invoked all of these examples is the video of a passenger complaining about the lack of air conditioning or the entertainment systems not working, etc., has been highlighted by a lot of media, including New York Post, including the BBC and others, as well as by some of the Indian media, with everyone trying to link this to, oh, if these things are not working, then the aircraft should have been maintained very poorly. Okay. And there is no connection between the two, absolutely no connection. So for example, if you have a car and then the entertainment system in your car is not working, it does not mean that you have not maintained the rest of the car. You have not, changed the oil, you have not changed the tires, you have not changed the brake fluid and all these things. It does not mean any of that. Okay, these are two different things. Absolutely, yes. An airline like Air India, now that it's owned by Tata's, should make sure that they give an excellent customer service and air conditioner, everything works, but the two are not at all related. Okay, so, but a lot of times the media launches this kind of propaganda so that it, creates a bias, and then it makes everyone believe, try to make a connection, right? You don't have to explicitly say these things. If you say that, hey, if you are not even maintaining your air conditioner, then how likely are you to have maintained the engines and the rest of the aircraft, right? That's the impression they want to leave you with. And this is exactly what happened on a previous occasion about 4 years ago, in the first, 7 or 8 years ago, in the first term of Trump's presidency, when 2 aircraft crashed. Okay, and at this time, I'll draw the attention of every viewer to an absolutely great documentary. Okay, it was based on investigative journalism. It relied upon the most expert opinion, facts, and evidence, and it's called Downfall: The Case Against Boeing. So this documentary, I think, came out in 2022. It's a 3-year-old documentary. It's an absolutely great documentary, and let me give a brief summary of that. So in the first term of President Trump, I think 17 or 18, I forgot the exact year, 2 aircraft crashed. One was an Indonesian aircraft by Lion Air. And when it crashed, it was not a Dreamliner. It was a 737 MAX 8. And in another case, it was a MAX 9. Okay, the first one was Lion Air. And when Lion Air crashed, something similar happened. Okay, the plane took off, and then within a few seconds, it went off the radar, the blip disappeared, and then the plane crashed. And as soon as it happened, the entire Western media, including FAA, came out and then they blamed the pilot. Okay, they said it's pilot error, and then these terrible pilots from third world countries do not know how to operate the aircraft, and hence it crashed. And then they were able to tie it to other factors like, oh, by the way, this Lion Air is a low-cost airline, and hence they would have ignored all the safety precautions. Okay? Yeah, go ahead.
Venkat, I want to say, viewers, there are a bunch of statements in social media where the format is almost as if a toolkit has been created. I mean, these are the things that China is extremely good at. Rather than finding out why their air defense systems are doing nothing, they would like to do something like this. It could also be Boeing, who knows, because they are losing 40 billion in the last 5 years. You'll see the same format. My name is something, I have so many hours of flying experience, and then the text is remarkably similar. I think this is a bot that is sending it. Please ignore that, and don't form your opinions based on one article or one post, or if something kind of echoes your viewpoints. Just keep an open mind, and Venkat is going to give us a lot of information. Are you talking about the Al Jazeera documentary, Venkat?
No. So this is
Oh, it's a different one.
yeah.
Okay.
So this is the pretty authentic one. It's not an Al Jazeera documentary, and the title of the documentary is "Downfall: The Case Against Boeing." So let me give a summary of that. So what happened when the Lion Air uh, flight crashed? They blamed it on pilot error. However, it soon turned out the widow of the pilot was an Indian. Okay, so and his pilot Suneja, his wife, his widow, came out and said, "My husband was trained in the United States." Then the investigation continued, and then what they found out was something startling. So there was a system called MCAS that had been added to the uh, to the plane design, to the aircraft design, and that was not notified to the pilots. Okay, none of the pilots were aware of that. And what does this MCAS do? This MCAS, so that whenever the aircraft is flying, there is something called the angle of attack, right? Because the aircraft is not always flying in a straight line. Sometimes the nose goes up, down due to various factors, either because you are ascending or you're descending, or due to changes in atmospheric pressure and other factors, it changes. And when it changes, they do have an angle of attack sensor outside the aircraft. Okay? And that detects this, and then it sends a signal back. And then a system known as MCAS, it's a software code that kicks in, and then it pushes the nose down or up based on the situation. And then it also works with the other stabilizers in the plan and within the aircraft. And then all those stabilizers are also adjusted to make the plane go up or down. Nobody was aware of this. And what in this case happened was when in the Lions Air case, the the sensor outside was probably damaged, and the MCAS took over. And then the pilots are getting an impression that the plane is, diving down, and then they were trying to pull it up, but it was not. It was what was happening was the MCAS was uh, overruling them, and then the plane crashed. So when this finally came out, the investigators, initially the Boeing, the FAA, and then the government, everybody was trying to protect Boeing and try to blame it on Lions Air. And for several months, they dodged. And then finally, when it became aware, when the pilots found out that there was a system called MCAS and nobody was notified about it. And if you're not notified, how will you know how to deal with a system like that? Especially an extremely powerful system that can override the pilot commands. How do you deal with it? You cannot. Okay? That's why Schellenberger, the hero of American Airlines in 2009, when both engines failed, he landed the plane in Potomac River. So he came out in the congressional hearing and he said,
Was it Hudson River or Potomac?
sorry, Hudson River. I said Potomac by mistake.
Yeah.
My mistake. Hudson.
New York.
So
Yeah.
he said uh, in the congressional hearing that a pilot should not be expected to um, correct a design flaw in the aircraft, which is a very valid point. But even more importantly, the investigations revealed that once MCAS kicks in, the pilot had less than 10 seconds to respond and correct. And how can you even correct? 10 seconds is too short a time. But if MCAS is going to repeatedly override the pilot, then what can you do? There's nothing you can do about it. But when this was hidden, and why was this hidden in the first place? The reason for that is starting from the late 90s, Boeing started losing market share to Airbus industry. Okay? Airbus is a French-based manufacturing, and in early 2000s, when they came out with Neo 320 Neo, that was a game changer. Okay, Boeing had nothing comparable to offer. Neo was a very fuel-efficient aircraft, much better designed aircraft, and very contemporary compared to 737, which was a late 60s, early 70s design. Okay? So Boeing was completely caught off guard, and then they had to launch something new. So what they did was they took the old aircraft, then 737, which has been around for almost 4 decades, and then they fitted that with new, more powerful, bigger, heavier, but more fuel efficient engines. Okay, which means they had to make some of the structural changes, bring the engines forward, up, and then to counter for that, that dive and other things, the angle of attack that can change. what Boeing did was to install these sensors and came up with an MCAS system. Okay, this was reason number one. But why did they not divulge it to the pilots and to the customers who were buying it? The reason for that was, if they did that, this was considered a significant change because the pilots have to now undergo a lot of training, simulator training, at least for a few days. And then if you're selling hundreds of aircraft, then thousands and thousands of pilots will have to be now taken off their duty and sent back to simulators and asked to practice, get certified, and then go out. That's number one. So Boeing did not want that. And uh, they thought that will affect their sales because the airline companies would be hesitant to buy an aircraft that requires a lot of training at this stage. Second, FAA, if they were to approve uh, a new design or a significant change to a design, that process takes several years, which Boeing did not want to invest in. Okay, they were more focused on the profit. So they started cutting corners. They lied. Okay, they said they basically hid the truth about MCAS from the entire FAA, the buying airlines, pilots, everyone, and they launched it. That's what caused the Lions Air crash. But they could not hide it for too long. Initially, they were running propaganda, just like they are doing now, saying that it was either poor maintenance by the Indonesians or pilot error and all of these things. And they even went out to make statements like an American pilot would know how to deal with the situation. And that's what was completely debunked by the finest of the American pilots who came out and said, no, those pilots were fighting for their life and for the lives of their passengers in a fight of their life. So don't blame the heroes, blame the culprits, the Boeing in this case. This got worse within 5 months when an Ethiopian Air uh, um, flight crashed immediately after takeoff. Same reason, MCAS. So in this case, between the two, since 5 months had elapsed and the truth about MCAS had come out, Boeing issued a directive to all the pilots saying, when you run into this kind of situation, switch off MCAS. But when the Ethiopian Air crash happened, the Western media played the same game as it had done 5 months ago in the case of Lions Air. They said the Ethiopian pilots are incompetent and that's why the plane crashed. However, Schellenberger and others defended the Ethiopian pilots, but more importantly, it turned out once the black box was recovered and FDR was recovered, that the pilots had actually turned off the MCAS system. Still, the plane went down and crashed. What does it tell you? It tells you that Boeing had not done really any testing. Okay, they did not know that turning off MCAS would solve the problem. But just to make sure that their corporate profits are not hit, they are not cannibalized, they lied to the public and to the pilots and to the airlines that if you run into this kind of catastrophic situation, turn off MCAS and it will solve the problem. It did not. The Ethiopian Air pilots turned it off, but still the plane crashed. And it was only after that Donald Trump, in his first term, grounded all the MAX 8 and MAX 9 aircraft for 20 months, and Boeing had to go and fix the software. It took them that much time. And then they came out, and then they once again relaunched the MAX series of aircraft. At that time, afterwards, when the documentary came in 2022, the one I talked about, Downfall, the case against Boeing, the engineers who became whistleblowers subsequently, they came out and divulged that all corners were cut in production of aircraft, and any complaint about quality control was faced with retribution. Okay, so if you're an engineer, you complained about a part failing, you are fired. Okay, and you are harassed. So all of these things happen starting from early 2000s. So this is what caused the previous crash. So now turn to this one. Okay, this is not 737 MAX. This is a Dreamliner. This is a 787, and hence it's a much wider bodied aircraft. But still, we know one thing for certain, that no aircraft is built from scratch, and a lot of the software is built upon and it is improved upon and it is used, and we do not know whether any of those would have played a critical role in this. But I want to highlight a few technical aspects here. Okay. Look at the first one. In this case, like I mentioned, both engines seem to have failed simultaneously. And this points to a complete electrical failure at some level. And that happened soon after takeoff. And as I mentioned, this is not due to pilot error because the pilots did all the right things. They deployed the RAT, and then there were other small technical glitches. For example, the landing gear did not retract, but that happens in many cases. That's never catastrophic. Okay. Then the flaps were not fully extended, but once again, that in itself could be due to some of the electrical failure happening. And uh, except that one mayday call, the pilots couldn't communicate. It was less than 30 seconds. But most importantly, the aircraft was not gaining a lift, okay, and it was not gaining speed at all. That was right after takeoff, okay, because right after takeoff, when you have, raised to something like 250, 300, is it miles per hour, kilometers, I forgot, and then you take off from the runway, that's when you start accelerating, and that's exactly when the engine seemed to have failed, and then the aircraft couldn't gain the lift. It just went up to 625 feet, much lower at that point in time. And then a mayday call was made, RAT was deployed, but it still couldn't fix it. Okay, so the fact that the deployment of RAT did not stabilize the aircraft once again points out to something more sinister. Could be a series of software failures or other comprehensive electrical failures, because all these aircraft are off fly-by-wire, right? So, which means if there is an electrical failure in the core systems, then it can cascade down. Okay, and it seems to shut down the engine and totally immobilize the pilots, and the plane crashed. So this is, I think, the most serious concern. This should warrant a comprehensive review of everything that has gone into Boeing aircraft, because it is a series of crashes that have happened, and then we have seen a lot of other things, including, there was an Alaska Air where an bolt came off, right? And then the door just flung open mid-flight, and luckily no passenger was killed, and the aircraft was able to land safely. But we are seeing these incidents way too often, and every time it happens, the media, which obviously is, backed by lobbyists and Boeing and others, they immediately deflect attention and they try to blame it on the pilot. Third world countries, poor maintenance, was, the fuel contaminated, and all of these things. But as I explained, none of those things adequately explain why this crash would have happened. That too within 30 seconds of takeoff, with both engines failing. So this to me points to a very, very structural failure, very design failure, something that led to complete electrical failure. And the fact that this doesn't happen all the time and it happens at random, because this aircraft flew from Delhi to Ahmedabad, no incidents. But right after that, when it was trying to take off for London, this happened. So this tells you that there are software glitches, okay, in the underlying code, which may be triggering these things, which make it very unpredictable. Okay, and even risks should be predictable so that we can work against those. But when they are unpredictable, that is a much bigger danger. And hence, I think what the government of India has ordered now is a very good step, a comprehensive review of the Boeing Dreamliners. But I think it should not be just focusing on the safety protocols, but need to look at everything, including the underlying software patches, which of them were divulged, was anything not divulged, and then was any of that in need of simulator training, but did Boeing suppress that for profit? All of that needs to be investigated. So that's the big picture I wanted to share with you. Back to you, sir.
So two things, viewers. The Turkish company was not maintaining Air India aircraft. My information is that Air India aircraft are managed by Lufthansa and Singapore Airlines and one other place, but not Turkish. So don't get into that one. That might not be there's no connection, looks like. I could be wrong, but our information, we have double checked it. It doesn't appear that 𝗟𝗍 was maintaining Air India MRO. Next one, there is a directive that has come from the Ministry of DGCA, Director General of Civil Aviation, and here there are a bunch of things that they want to do, pre-flight checks. They are saying that you need to do a one-time check before departure of flight from India with effect from 15th June 12:00. That is 00:00. That means midnight. A. Inspection of fuel parameter monitoring and associated system checks. B. Inspection of cabin air compressor and associated systems. C. Electronic engine control system test. D. Engine fuel driven actuator operation test and oil system check. I see the first line is the most significant. Somewhere the fuel parameter monitoring may have not been done. Maybe the ground crew thought, hey, it had just flown in from Delhi, right? So this is a creeping fault. Looks like
on that count, right? See, was the aircraft refueled in Ahmedabad? I'm not sure. Okay, so but I would think probably not, because that would have just delayed the time in Ahmedabad by at least an hour or so if they were to do refueling. So if there was any fuel contamination, the flight from Delhi to Ahmedabad couldn't have been a smooth one. Okay, what if there was a water contamination and had started freezing? You would have run into trouble. So I seriously doubt there was any fuel contamination. But also, more importantly, this fuel contamination is quite a rarity. Okay, especially in India. Okay, because the oil companies take this very seriously, because it's a very critical function, and there are officers who would be checking that, and then the pilots always make sure of these things. They look at the samples, and then they do a walk around and all these things. They do all of these things. So I doubt that this parameter would have been ignored. But the fact, right? So I don't even think I don't at least see evidence of sabotage. Like it was not a bomb, as if a bomb went off and the plane crashed. Nothing of that sort happened. Okay, so by all accounts, right, when we look at this, both engines lost power. There was a complete electrical shutdown, and then even the deployment of RAT didn't save the plane. And think of this, right? These pilots responded so quickly. Okay, so it was less than 30 seconds before the flight ended up in a catastrophic crash. But then before that, the pilots had issued a mayday call. Okay, they had deployed the RAT, and then they were trying to stabilize the plane as much as they could, but to no avail, and it crashed. The pilots had done a fantastic job. Okay, and then these two pilots, I understand from all the online reports that between them they had like 9,000 or so flight hours, 8 or 9,000 flight hours. That's a fantastic experience on board. Okay, so such pilots don't make mistakes, and not something as elementary as this. So that's why I doubt that fuel parameter was really an issue in this case.
There is one request to people: please don't spam. You put one message on chat, people do read it. Don't put it 5 times. It doesn't really help your cause. And we can't just keep on requesting you not to spam and then we shut you out. If we see 2 or 3 times back to back, we are going to take your comments out. Sorry. This is a very responsible channel. We are talking something very serious. We don't want to sound like it is this way or that way. We are looking at it. Venkat and I, were prepped for a long time before we came online on this one. So that's why I'm saying that this is a serious channel. Venkat, I'm just mentioning the first line from the directive that has come. Why I say fuel is because if you look at that picture, I mean, we can't fly that video. Yesterday, we flew that video where it is from the CCTV of the airport itself. Take off from the runway, it starts climbing up a little bit, and then it suddenly loses power. Don't play it, please. Don't play it, please. Thank you. We got docked on that one. So this thing takes off, and then as soon as it reaches about 600 feet altitude, the thing loses power and the plane slowly drifts to its left, and then it crashes, and it crashed into that medical college hostel building. And I guess it was around lunchtime. People were there, so that's another collateral damage here. So then why did the fuel stop going to the engine? This is simple. If there is no fuel going to the engine, it is going to crash.
But how do we
So I'm
we
just,
know that,
yeah.
how do we know that fuel stopped going to the engine, right? So we do not know that yet. Okay, and uh, uh, all we know is that the aircraft stalled at some stage. Okay, and then like I mentioned, uh, before stalling and crashing, its vertical velocity was a paltry 470 feet per minute. That's the speed at that's slower than the speed at which we jog. Okay, that's when the plane crashes, it stalls and crashes. So at this stage, we do not know that there was any fuel blockade to the engines. Uh, However, what we know is that both the engines had ceased, both the engines had stopped functioning. That's why Mayday call was issued. Okay, that's the most critical fact.
Let's just stop for a minute. Let's stop for a minute, Kalavai. Venkat, just stop for a minute. So, viewers, we got clarification that yesterday we got dark, but looks like it got clarified. So, we're going to play that thing. Take a look at that, and then you can continue this. We're just going to play a 50-second video from the time it takes off to the time it crashes. Take a look. See that drift? Go ahead.
Yeah. So, that's a little bit of drift, but once again, right? So, you can see the left wingspan tipping a little bit to the left and crashing. So we do not know what caused it. Maybe the pilots are desperately trying to, uh, get the nose up and then to kind of, maneuver the plane. We do not know that because unless the black box is fully analyzed, FDR is fully analyzed, we wouldn't know that. But what is very evident at this point, I think that's what all the aviation experts are also saying, is that both engines failed. Okay? Both engines lost electrical connectivity. And another reason, the reason even the deployment of RAT did not save the aircraft was probably even the deployment did not get the commands back to the aircraft because there was a complete and total electrical failure. Okay, so that's why, Share, I think that more than every other factor, it is an underlying design issue that has caused this crash. Okay, that's what I hope the investigators would be able to clarify and bring it out, and hopefully that'll be the case. But
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Looking at the fact that it is drifting, which means that they lost steering control also. Is there no manual override for steering? I'm talking about, I've seen a lot of World War II movies where, manual steering used to happen. Of course, we are 80 years later. Is there no manual steering available? How can it drift?
no, it can,
That is,
So it can. So if you like the documentary I was mentioning, uh, so watch, Downfall, the case against Boeing. They track the trajectories, the flight data, uh, uh, the graphs, everything. And in both cases, what happened was the pilots were trying to stabilize the aircraft, the Indonesian and the Ethiopian aircraft, but the aircraft was going like this, like this, like this, like this. Okay, like a sine wave. Okay, and then what is the reason? Because they explained that the aviation experts explained that in the documentary that the stick was literally rattling. Okay, so in other words, whatever the pilots were trying to do, the underlying MCAS system was trying to override it, and then the stick was trying to rattle. Okay, so everything the pilot was doing manually, most of times pilots will be able to override, and I don't even believe that time of takeoff and touchdown pilots are using autopilot. Okay, so they mostly take on the manual mode, switch to the manual mode, and hand fly the plane at the time of takeoff, at the time of touchdown, and mostly it's at the cruising altitudes that they switch to autopilot. So in this case, the pilots under normal circumstances would have been able to control the aircraft. But if the underlying systems, like the stick was rattling, and then the underlying system was overriding the pilots, there's nothing the pilots could have done. The same happened with both Lion Air and Ethiopian Air crash. So again, we do not know at this stage. It's too early. It's less than a day or so since the crash happened. So, but I think when the investigations come out and when they look at the flight trajectory, because sometimes, when you look at a video like this, it can give you an optical illusion too, right? So, and the optical illusions are quite powerful. It depends on the angle at which the plane is stalling and crashing, etc. But the flight path, which is captured by the radar and as well as by the flight data recorder and other things, will give a much better story once the investigation is complete. But my reading at this point, looking at all the evidences, since both engines failed and the electrical is the most likely reason for that should have been a catastrophic electrical failure, which in turn would have been caused by some underlying sensors and the software that get activated when the sensors go off.
Let's take a look at that one article I had sent you a link. Viewers, we'll put that link in the reference section. Do read that article, because there was this whistleblower called John Barnett. Yeah, you can put that thing also. This is what I was reading. There's one checks document that DGCA has put out, Director General of Civil Aviation. I was reading from this when I was telling you, right? The first line item, inspection of fuel parameter monitoring and associated system checks. Read this, one gets the impression that somewhere corners were cut. I'll tell you why, because I've seen this. Air India, as a rule, runs late, even with all the functioning aircraft. Now with 787s grounded to make sure everything is okay for some time at least. You can be sure if you're going to fly Air India, you're going to be late by a few hours at least. And it is because they have opened up many sectors and they don't have enough aircraft. So they just keep bouncing things around. They are doing this thing all the time. I'll tell you why. Recent flight from New York to Mumbai. This is a very prestigious flight. We can take off that thing. In that flight, what happened was the panel did not work. In fact, 50% of the planes that I have flown international, point to point, San Francisco to New Delhi, San Francisco to Bangalore, the complete TV system doesn't work. It never works. And second thing was that the plane that I flew from New York to Mumbai, this is a fairly prestigious flight, business capitals of the two countries. And that plane had the same problem that I've had in the past, which is that when you want to recline to go to sleep, right, that setting doesn't work.
No, I hear you on that. I hear you on that.
No, let me finish it. What I'm trying to say is they have been doing a balancing act. Air India has been trying to do, and I'll tell you why I'm saying all this. So I asked the air hostess who was, supporting us. I was flying business class, and I was expecting some amount of comfort. I had to hit the ground running once I landed. So what she said was, "Sir, we usually fly better aircraft. Today we got this." Okay, so that's what I'm trying to make a point, that they were really switching and make sure that there is some plane available to take you from place A to place B. And Air India had some other unfortunate grounding. One time they had to ground the plane in Russia for no-name place. Another time somewhere else also it had to happen. I think in Canada they had to ground once. So there is a problem.
If you look at almost all the airlines, right, including the airlines like United, Delta, American Airlines, and all of these things, Alaska, we talked about one of those, the door coming off mid-flight, happened with Alaska Airlines, right? So all these things happen with other airlines too. But a very important distinction I want to make is, like, the examples you said were all really annoying, right? When we are on a long distance flight, if the seats don't recline, if the entertainment systems don't work, or, if the flight is delayed and all these things, those are really annoying. But we must distinguish that from aircraft maintenance. Okay. And
yeah. I'm just mentioning. No, this is not very unusual. That's all I'm saying.
No. And the reason I say that is when you take the flight entertainment systems. Okay, those are mostly written by companies like Rockwell Collins. Okay, so they create the flight entertainment systems, and then all the software going with it. Okay, those are mostly like the luxury features you add on to, let's say, your car, right? You buy a car, uh, you may go ahead and, buy a Tesla or a BMW or anything, and, you may put a new Harman Kardon system or a Bose system in that. So it's like that, right? So that doesn't, because mostly these are API interfaces, and that doesn't have direct bearing on the aircraft maintenance. And uh, I'm not aware of any um, airline, including Air India, that would take chances and cut corners when it comes to aircraft maintenance for two simple reasons, right? Aircraft are really expensive. And if you don't maintain, the price you'll pay is significantly higher. And this is a relatively new aircraft, right? And this was only bought, I think, what, 7 or 8 years ago, something like that. Okay. And then second, uh, if there is poor maintenance, you will get dinged. Okay. And then, for example, in the past, the US has banned certain foreign airlines, not Air India, from flying to the US. Lion Air was one such. Okay. In the bygone era, Lion Air from Indonesia was not allowed to fly to the US. And then they lifted the ban, I think, after a few years, after the maintenance got better. So this kind of critical aircraft maintenance is strictly monitored, not only by DGCA, but by international bodies too. Because what happens if an Air India plane flies over the US and then because of poor maintenance crashes, Americans would die too. That's why airlines don't cut corners on that. And I'm absolutely sure Air India would not have cut any corners on the maintenance. And that's why I think some of these notes put out by DGCA, right, when they start with, look at the uh, fuel parameters, I think some of those are hastily written bureaucratic directives, okay, because all they do is they uh, add fuel to the propaganda that the Boeing lobbies are launching when they try to blame maintenance or pilot error and all of these things for the crash, instead of focusing the attention on whether there was a design flaw, whether there was a catastrophic failure is leading to electrical failure that failed both the engines simultaneously, was that a software glitch. Instead of focusing on that, they deflect attention to all these things. So sometimes, this kind of statement coming out is, I think, a little bit premature. And, I think a rather more balanced approach is put forth everything, right? Hey, we are going to investigate everything, but like I said, the design failure should be the prime area of focus and concern for us.
Venkat, you make a good point that these are not connected with the core functioning of the aircraft, and I completely agree with you. I've had flight entertainment issues with other airlines also. I've also had food contamination issues with other airlines. Food is always a forte of Air India. Food service, fantastic. So let me, because I'm hearing there's a lot of chatter going on. Why are you saying this? My point in saying all that was that if you have problems like the chairs adjusting, people can put up with it. I mean, I do. I mean, I never stop Air India because this was a problem. Because all it is that you can't do it. You ask them whenever you're ready to sleep, they come and fix it for you, and then you go on. And entertainment doesn't work. I mean, come on now. I don't watch the entertainment thing. I have loaded up work to do flying when I'm awake. So it's for me, it doesn't make a difference. The takeaway here is there is the core flying aspect, and there is also these other things. Let's set these other things aside. You're absolutely right. We are talking about why the big thing happened, why the thing failed. Because I didn't stop Air India, flying Air India because of these things. Because it's convenient. You get into the plane, you get down in India. Same vice versa, right? And
I think here is where we should look at the provenance, right? What Boeing did in the previous crashes. Okay, over the last decade, when the Max crashes happened, Boeing played the exact sinister game, right? They launched a propaganda, they blamed it on pilot error, they blamed it on maintenance, they blamed it on third world airlines not being up to the mark, and even went to the extent of claiming that an American pilot would have never ended up in this situation. They are beginning to repeat the same old, dishonest, sinister propaganda in this case also. Okay, I think that's why I think DGCA made a tactical mistake by just issuing a bureaucratic directive, stupid directive, because anyone who has even has the slightest experience with flying would know that these fuel parameters are the very first things that a pilot would check, and absolutely so the case with pilots, the combined flying experience of over 8,000 hours, which is a lot, okay, which is like 20 plus years of experience. I think the captain was 20 plus years of experience, I think. So these mistakes don't happen, okay? So I think that's why, yes, as part of investigation, everything from sabotage to uh, pilot error to maintenance error, everything should be looked into. But over and above everything, given the history of Boeing, given how they behaved with the previous MAX crashes, and how they suppressed and how FAA played by that, right? So you would remember that initially they did not ground the planes. Okay, when the Indonesian and the Ethiopian crashes happened, and they in fact went out to declare that, oh, it's pilot error. You remember that guy? What's his name? Muhlenberg, right? The CEO of, at the time, the CEO of Boeing. He lied through his teeth time and again. And then he said there's nothing wrong with the plane. MAX aircraft are absolutely safe. Okay. Which was the first country to ground all the aircraft? Not the US. The US FAA and others went with Boeing. Okay. Because everybody was focused on the profit. It was China which grounded all the 737 MAX at that time. And then Trump had no other option, especially after Ethiopian crashed. And then the facts became evident. He had no other option. Then he grounded. And it took them 20 months to fix the problem. Okay. A software problem, 20 months to fix it, especially with all the spotlight on. That tells you how much of cascading effect those software code should have had, and which is why they took so much time to fix it. I think that's the reason I'll mention. Yes, the rest of the experience related to entertainment system, seats not reclining, air conditioners not working properly, food not being tasty enough can all be really annoying. But those do not result in catastrophic air crashes. Okay? What caused
We'll
that is
also
most
touch.
likely a technical failure, a very serious design failure, a very serious software failure that shut down the electricals. Okay, so and that's why the twin engine failure, to the best of my knowledge, has happened only once. Okay, in the last uh, 25, 30 years. That was the landing on the Hudson River. That time, uh, Captain Schellenberger was able to land it safely because the aircraft had attained a higher altitude and hence it had speed and it was able to
There was
glide down.
water body, right? There was water
There was a
body.
water. So it was
It
it was
was
a combination.
fortunate circumstances. Fortunate
It's a fortunate
circumstances.
circumstance.
Yeah.
Of course, the pilot was great. He did a fantastic job of landing it, but he could not have landed that over a medical college, right? Or over
Right,
a
right, right, right.
city center or anything. He was lucky enough to have Hudson River where he could land the plane.
Okay, one more thing we have to touch upon before we wind up today. There was this whistleblower, John Barnett, and he was giving testimony about the flaws in the Boeing planes, especially the Dreamliner. And he was one of the QA managers, and he was refusing to sign off on some of the omissions by the crew. This is supposedly have happened in the South Carolina plant of Boeing. And one of the observations he made was that the problems that I'm highlighting will not show up on day one. It will show up 10 to 13, 15 years later. Guess what? This is one such plane that was caught having a lot of loosey-goosey assembly problems. This specific plane. I'll give you the link. Please read that thing all the way to the end. And this man killed himself after 2 days of testimony, and he had one more day to offer testimony. US is becoming like a banana republic, and nobody had any problems with that. There were other whistleblowers also who were also concerned about the quality of the products Boeing was putting out, and everybody's mouth was shut. So there are some serious issues that were done right at the assembly point itself, not now. And this was delivered to India in January 2014. So it's been flying for 11 years. A lot of things to think about from that also. If you have had a chance to read that article, I think I sent you that article. Maybe you can just summarize it for us. There were huge problems at the beginning itself.
That particular article I have not yet read it. My apologies. So.
Oh, okay, no problem, no problem. Yeah, because it struck me. That's where there was an Al Jazeera documentary that was also taken, and the thing what happened was anybody who gave an interview to that person was also taken to task afterwards. A lot of stuff has happened in Boeing. They were getting huge numbers of orders. And you see, it's like giving birth to a child. 9 months is 9 months. And planes of this size, right? You don't have an assembly line for planes. Each plane is constructed in a separate hangar. It's not your normal run-of-the-mill manufacturing line. It's a different thing. And each one you have to check. So there are lots of things also from the assembly point itself. They also say that this particular plane, this particular 787, was pulled off of delivery because there were some glaring omissions at the time of delivery itself, and they had to hold it back, and then they did it, and then they released it. So long story short, Boeing has cut corners. There is no doubt about that. There's no way a whistleblower would kill himself when he's 2/3 into his testimony. I find it very, very, very strange. So be that as it may, this is where things stand, and we'll find out more as the information comes along. Let's I don't know if you have time for questions. Maybe we'll just take 1 or 2 questions, because we have another program coming up in half an hour's time. Okay, let's take the Q&A, please. Kapil, thank you so much, Cardamom Ginger Tea, for becoming a YouTube member. Wasn't there a plane crash last year inside China? How was the investigation followed up? Do you remember this one, Venkat?
I don't.
China has made its own plane also. Venkatramani Sripurna wants to know, is there any periodicity of checks of flight conditions when DGCA gives notices, whether it checks for compliance and ensure that only after go ahead by DGCA, same is used for public use?
Yes. Definitely.
Next one, please. Yeah. Vijay Kumar Srivastava wants to know, sir, Boeing had double engine and guarantee for 50 years. This is only 11 years old. Its first accident, doubt to Turkey TR manager. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I doubt sabotage is a factor here, but let investigation find it out.
Next one, please. Naresh wants to know, is it because of lift performance due to saving fuel on long range? No, I don't.
No, the aircraft was fully loaded with fuel. Amit Shah has disclosed it. That's not a factor. So aircraft are all designed to carry that much fuel and still lift off.
Okay, the China airplane incident took place in what was the date? 2022, 21st March 2022. It was a Boeing 737-89P. That was a 737 again. So that's all we have information. There were 132 passengers and full crew, and everybody died in that. So I think the needle of suspicion, I guess, is pointing towards something perhaps in the plane itself. So we'll wait and see how this goes out. I mean, all we can say is, our heartfelt condolences to all those who have lost their near and dear. Imagine a father has 2 sons. One son is on one extreme corner of row 11. The other son is on the other extreme corner of row 11. Almost identical. Both are window seats. Both are extra legroom. One makes it, the other one doesn't.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Venkat. And this is a very difficult topic to discuss, viewers. And let's wait and see what information comes out. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you.